Neglect is one of the clearest and most painful signs that someone does not truly value you. It may not arrive in grand betrayals or loud arguments, but rather in the quiet absence of care, attention, and presence. When your needs are consistently overlooked, when your voice is drowned out by indifference, you begin to feel invisible. A relationship cannot thrive when one person is always reaching while the other is always retreating. Love requires engagement, and without it, neglect takes its place. At first, neglect often hides behind excuses. He may say he is busy, stressed, or distracted, and while life does bring those seasons, true value is shown in consistency. Even in business, people who care will find ways to show up, even in small gestures, a text, a kind word, a willingness to listen. These are signals that you matter. When those gestures are absent over and over, the message is not about time, but about priority. And if you are not a priority, the relationship is already unbalanced. Neglect also reveals itself when your feelings are dismissed instead of honored. If you express hurt and he shrugs it off or makes you feel guilty for speaking up, he is minimizing your experience. That dismissal is not just about one moment, but about the pattern it creates. Over time, you start to silence yourself because you believe your emotions do not matter. This is how neglect slowly erodes your sense of self in the relationship, leaving you unheard and unseen. There is a difference between healthy independence and neglect. Independence allows both people to thrive individually while still coming together in love and care. Neglect, on the other hand, is withdrawal without regard for the other person's needs. It is the act of leaving someone emotionally stranded while still claiming to be present. A man who values you will honor your independence while still showing up with consistency. A man who neglects you will use independence as an excuse for absence. Neglect often feels confusing because it rarely shouts, it whispers. It is not always dramatic, but it is persistent. You may find yourself questioning whether you are asking for too much or being unreasonable. That doubt is part of the harm neglect causes. You start adjusting your expectations downward, convincing yourself to settle for scraps of attention. But real value is not measured in crumbs. It is measured in consistent care. If you feel starved for attention, it is not because you are too demanding, but because he is not investing enough. The danger of neglect is that it creates loneliness within connection. Being physically next to someone but emotionally distant is one of the most isolating experiences a person can have. You may still share space, but without presence, the bond weakens. The warmth of being valued cannot survive in the coldness of neglect. A relationship that should be a source of strength instead becomes a source of emptiness. That emptiness signals a lack of respect for your worth. Recognizing neglect requires courage because it forces you to confront painful truths. It means admitting that you deserve more than excuses, more than silence, and more than indifference. It means facing the reality that someone's inability to value you has nothing to do with your worth. Love is not proven in what someone promises, but in how they show up day after day. When neglect becomes the pattern, the clearest truth emerges: he does not value you, and you must value yourself enough to see it. Disrespect is one of the deepest wounds a relationship can carry, and it is a sure sign that a man does not truly value you. Respect is the foundation of love, and without it, no amount of affection, promises, or gifts can sustain a bond. When a man mocks your voice, belittles your ideas, or treats your boundaries as unworthy, he is showing you who he is. Disrespect strips away dignity little by little until you start doubting your own worth. A relationship built on disrespect cannot nurture growth. It only suffocates it. At first, disrespect might appear as jokes disguised as humor. He might laugh at your dreams or use sarcasm to dismiss your feelings. While it may seem harmless, those jokes reveal a deeper disregard for your value. Words matter, and the language we use shapes the emotional environment of a relationship. When words consistently tear down instead of building up, It is not love, but erosion. A man who values you speaks life into you, not words that shrink you. Disrespect also shows itself in the way he treats your time and priorities. If he constantly dismisses your schedule, ignores commitments, or expects you to bend without compromise, he is signaling that his needs are superior. Value is shown through consideration, and when that is missing, you are left carrying the imbalance. Love requires partnership, not dominance. If your time and energy are disregarded, it reveals a lack of genuine care for who you are. Boundaries are another space where disrespect becomes visible. A man who values you will honor your limits because he respects your personhood. A man who pushes, ignores, or ridicules your boundaries is showing you that his desires matter more than your comfort. Disrespect thrives in crossed lines where one person's voice is drowned out by another's insistence. Protecting your boundaries is not selfish, it is necessary. Without boundaries, disrespect grows unchecked, and love cannot survive in that environment. Disrespect often hides in tone and body language as much as in words. Rolling eyes, dismissive sighs, or walking away during a conversation all communicate disregard. While subtle, these actions are powerful because they send the message that your presence or perspective is not worth attention. Over time, these repeated gestures can make you feel small, invisible, and silenced. Respect is about acknowledgement, and when that is missing, connection slowly dies. The danger of disrespect is that it can make you question yourself more than him. You may wonder if you are too sensitive, too needy, or too demanding. But this is how disrespect manipulates. It shifts the responsibility away from the behavior and onto your reaction. The truth is simple, E. If someone consistently disregards your feelings, it is not about you being too much, but about him giving too little. Love is never about making someone shrink to fit another's ego. Recognizing disrespect requires courage because it often comes from someone you love deeply. It hurts to admit that a person you trusted has failed to honor your worth, but ignoring disrespect does not make it disappear. It only allows it to grow stronger. Value is proven in daily actions, not in apologies after repeated harm. If a man truly values you, respect will be evident in his words, his tone, his choices, and his presence. Without respect, there can be no true love because love cannot flourish where dignity is denied. Lack of accountability is one of the clearest signs that a man does not value you because accountability is proof of respect, maturity, and love. When someone refuses to own their actions, they leave you carrying the weight of their choices. A man who values you will admit when he is wrong, listen to how his behavior affects you, and take steps to do better. Without accountability, words are empty, promises are broken, and trust begins to wither. Love without responsibility is not love, it is avoidance. When accountability is missing, blame shifting takes its place. Instead of saying, "I hurt you and I'm sorry," he might say, "You're too sensitive," or, "If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't have reacted this way." This behavior is not about resolving conflict, but about escaping responsibility. Over time, you start questioning your own perception of reality, wondering if you are the problem. This tactic, often subtle, leaves you silenced while he remains unchallenged. That silence feeds shame and keeps the cycle alive. Excuses also become the language of a man who refuses accountability. He may say he was tired, stressed, or misunderstood, using circumstances as shields against change. But the truth is that excuses only serve to protect ego, not the relationship. Growth requires honesty, and honesty begins with acknowledging harm without deflecting. A man who values you will care more about repairing the relationship than about protecting his pride. Excuses may ease his conscience, but they deepen your hurt. Accountability is also about the willingness to change. Apologies without changed behavior are manipulation disguised as remorse. If he says sorry, but continues to repeat the same actions, the apology is meaningless. Real accountability means learning, adjusting, and committing to do better. It is about showing through consistent action that your well-being matters. Without this, the relationship becomes a cycle of hurt, apology, and repeat, leaving you drained and devalued. The absence of accountability creates a toxic dynamic where trust cannot survive. Every relationship needs trust as its foundation, and trust is built on responsibility. When someone refuses to admit mistakes, that foundation begins to crack. You cannot feel safe with someone who denies their role in your pain. Safety is not about perfection. It is about knowing that when harm happens, it will be acknowledged and repaired. Without that, you are left standing on unstable ground. One of the most damaging effects of no accountability is how it impacts your self-worth. Over time, you may begin to believe that your feelings do not matter because they are never validated. You may learn to silence yourself, to stop speaking up because your words are always dismission of voice is dangerous because it convinces you to accept less than you deserve. A man who values you will never make you feel that your emotions are inconvenient. He will make space for them because he cares. Recognizing the lack of accountability is painful, but it is also freeing. It reveals the truth that someone who refuses to take responsibility is showing you he does not value the relationship enough to protect it. You cannot build intimacy without accountability, and you cannot build a future on denial. True value is shown not in perfection, but in the humility to say, I was wrong and I will do better. When that humility is absent, the relationship becomes a place of harm instead of healing, and that truth must be faced with courage. Emotional unavailability is one of the most painful realities to face in a relationship because it makes you feel like you are reaching for someone who is never really there. A man who does not value you will keep his emotions locked away, offering only surface-level interactions. You may hear his words, but never feel his heart. This distance creates a wall that prevents intimacy from growing. Love cannot thrive when connection is one-sided and depth is denied. When someone is emotionally unavailable, conversations often feel shallow or unfinished. You may try to share your fears, dreams, or struggles, but his responses are brief, dismissive, or distracted. Instead of engaging, he shuts down or changes the subject, leaving you feeling unseen. This avoidance sends the message that your inner world does not matter to him. Value is reflected in presence, and when presence is withheld, so is care. Emotional absence is a quiet rejection. Emotional unavailability often hides behind busyness or distraction. He may bury himself in work, hobbies, or screens to avoid connection. At first, it might look like ambition or independence, but over time you notice the gap it creates. Time spent together becomes time spent apart emotionally, even when you share the same space. The avoidance of vulnerability robs the relationship of warmth. When someone values you, they make time not just for your body, but for your soul. Vulnerability is the key to intimacy, and when it is absent, love becomes an empty performance. A man who does not value you will resist opening up about his fears or emotions because he does not see you as someone worthy of that trust. Instead, he hides behind a mask of control, toughness, or detachment. This lack of honesty makes you feel like a stranger to him, no matter how long you've been together. Without vulnerability, closeness remains out of reach. The impact of emotional unavailability is that it slowly convinces you to minimize your own needs. You may stop sharing, stop asking, and stop hoping because every attempt at depth feels met with silence. You begin to feel lonely even when you are not alone. That loneliness is a sign that the relationship is not providing the emotional safety it should. True value means offering a safe place for someone to be fully themselves, not silencing them with indifference. Emotional unavailability also creates imbalance where you give more than you receive. You may become the caretaker, the listener, the supporter, while your needs remain unmet. Over time, this imbalance exhausts you because love is not supposed to drain. It is supposed to replenish. When one person refuses to engage emotionally, the other is left carrying the full weight of the relationship. A man who values you would never expect you to give endlessly without receiving in return. Perhaps the most painful part of emotional unavailability is the false hope it creates. You may believe that if you just love harder, wait longer, or prove yourself more, he will finally open up. But love cannot force emotional presence. A man who values you will not need convincing to share his heart. He will do so willingly because connection matters to him. Waiting for someone to become available often means waiting in vain. Value is shown in effort, not in promises of someday. Controlling behavior is a clear signal that a man does not value you because true value is rooted in respect, not domination. When someone tries to control you, they are showing that your voice, choices, and individuality are less important than their need for power. This behavior can start subtly with small criticisms or suggestions disguised as care, but over time it grows into restrictions and commands. Control is not love, it is fear disguised as concern. Love empowers while control diminishes. A man who seeks to control you may dictate how you dress, who you spend time with, or even how you express yourself. At first, it may appear as if he is protective, but true protection never limits freedom. Instead of celebrating your independence, he feels threatened by it and tries to shrink your world. This constant monitoring leaves you feeling caged rather than cherished. A valued partner encourages growth, not confinement. Control strips away dignity while respect nurtures it. Another form of control is emotional manipulation, where he uses guilt, silence, or anger to steer your behavior. Instead of communicating openly, he leverages emotions to bend situations in his favor. For example, he may sulk if you spend time with friends or accuse you of not caring enough when you set boundaries. This tactic erodes your confidence and makes you doubt your right to make choices. Genuine love never demands you sacrifice yourself just to keep the peace. Financial control is another destructive form of devaluation. A man who withholds money, tracks your spending, or makes you financially dependent is not valuing you, but using resources as a weapon. This creates an unequal dynamic where you feel trapped, unable to make independent decisions. Money in a relationship should be a shared tool for building, not a chain for controlling. When someone values you, they trust you as an equal partner, not as someone to dominate through dependence. Control also shows up in constant criticism, where nothing you do ever feels good enough. He may point out flaws in your appearance, your choices, or your efforts, making you feel inadequate. Criticism undercuts self-worth and forces you into a position of seeking his approval at all costs. This behavior creates a cycle where you strive for validation that never comes. True value is expressed in encouragement and acceptance, not in tearing someone down to feel superior. Jealousy and possessiveness often masquerade as love, but are actually forms of control. When a man constantly accuses you of disloyalty or demands to know where you are, he is not protecting the relationship. He is policing it. This behavior is rooted in insecurity, not devotion. Over time, it destroys trust and suffocates freedom. A partner who values you will trust you, support your connections, and celebrate your independence, not restrict you with suspicion and fear. The most dangerous part of controlling behavior is how it convinces you to shrink yourself. You may begin to suppress your opinions, dreams, and passions just to avoid conflict. Slowly, you lose pieces of yourself, thinking it will keep the relationship stable. But relationships built on control are never stable. They are fragile structures propped up by fear. A man who values you will never ask you to be less so he can feel like more. Love expands you, it never confines. Disrespect in a relationship is one of the clearest signs that a man does not truly value you. It can appear in many different forms, sometimes obvious and sometimes subtle, but the effect is always the same. It chips away at your worth. Disrespect can show up through dismissive words, condescending tones, or a lack of regard for your opinions. It sends the message that your presence is not important, your contributions do not matter, and your feelings can be ignored. Respect is the foundation of love, and without it, intimacy cannot survive. One of the most common ways disrespect shows up is through communication. When a man talks over you, interrupts, or ignores what you are saying, he is showing that your voice carries little weight in his world. Instead of listening, he may dominate the conversation or dismiss your input as irrelevant. Over time, this behavior makes you feel invisible, as though your thoughts have no value. A man who values you listens to you fully, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but truly engaging with your perspective. Disrespect also reveals itself through broken promises and lack of reliability. When he consistently fails to follow through on commitments, whether big or small, it shows disregard for your time and trust. Excuses may follow, but the pattern of neglect proves that your needs are not prioritized. This erodes the sense of safety and reliability that healthy relationships depend on. A man who values you understands that trust is built on consistency, not empty words. Mockery and sarcasm, often disguised as jokes, can also be forms of disrespect. When he belittles your dreams, makes fun of your weaknesses, or embarrasses you in front of others, it is not humor, it is cruelty. Such behavior may seem minor at first, but it cuts deeply over time, leaving scars on your confidence. A loving partner uplifts and protects your dignity, never using your vulnerabilities as a weapon. Respect is shown by kindness, not by constant ridicule, and disrespect can take the form of neglecting boundaries. If you say no and he pushes anyway, or if you set limits and he ignores them, he is proving that your comfort is less important than his desires. Boundaries are a sign of self-respect, and when they are violated, it shows a lack of regard for who you are as a person. A man who values you honors your boundaries, understanding that they are not restrictions, but expressions of your worth. When respect is absent, boundaries are trampled. Another form of disrespect is comparing you to others, whether openly or subtly. When a man makes you feel like you must compete with someone else for his attention or admiration, he is diminishing your uniqueness. Instead of celebrating who you are, he sets you against impossible standards. This fosters insecurity and resentment, leaving you feeling unappreciated. A partner who values you will see your individuality as irreplaceable, never measuring you against anyone else. Perhaps the deepest wound disrespect leaves is the feeling of unworthiness. When your emotions are dismissed, your efforts are unrecognized, and your value is questioned, you begin to doubt yourself. Disrespect slowly convinces you that you must accept less than you deserve. But love without respect is not love at all. It is possession or convenience. A man who truly values you will never strip you of your dignity. Instead, he will treat your heart and soul with care. Respect is not optional. It is proof of love. A lack of support in a relationship is one of the strongest indicators that a man does not value you. Support is more than just words. It is the willingness to stand beside you in your struggles and celebrate with you in your victories. When a man withholds support, he is essentially saying that your growth, challenges, and dreams are not worth his effort. Over time, this absence creates loneliness even when you are not physically alone. Love without support becomes hollow and fragile. Support is most visible when you pursue your goals. A man who values you will encourage your ambitions, whether they are career, related, personal, or creative. He will cheer you on, offer advice when you ask, and create space for you to grow. A man who does not value you will dismiss your dreams as unrealistic, minimize your achievements, or act indifferent to your progress. Instead of being your partner in growth, he becomes a silent obstacle, draining your motivation and confidence. Emotional support is equally vital. Life brings challenges from work stress to personal struggles, and in those moments, we turn to the people closest to us for comfort. When a man refuses to be present during your hardships, it is a painful sign of disconnection. He may brush off your feelings, change the subject, or show irritation when you seek comfort. This lack of empathy tells you that your pain is inconvenient rather than important. A valued partner listens, comforts, and helps carry the weight of your burdens. Practical support is another area where absence becomes clear. Whether it is helping with responsibilities, being dependable in daily tasks, or showing up when needed, these actions reflect commitment. A man who leaves you to handle everything alone while contributing little reveals that he sees your effort as expected rather than appreciated. True value is shown in partnership, where burdens are shared and one person is not left to carry the load alone. Support is an act of love in motion. Celebrating your achievements is another form of support that cannot be ignored. When you succeed, no matter how small, a man who values you will share your joy and make you feel proud of your progress. But when he reacts with indifference, envy, or dismissal, it sends the message that your success threatens him or simply does not matter. This robs you of the joy you deserve and leaves you questioning your worth. True love is never intimidated by your light, it amplifies it. A lack of support often comes with subtle neglect, where he shows up only when it benefits him. If he is present during his victories but absent during yours, it becomes clear that the relationship is one-sided. Support should be mutual, not transactional. A man who values you sees your happiness and stability as part of his own. When he consistently withholds encouragement, comfort, or help, he reveals that he is invested only in himself, not in the bond you share. The absence of support ultimately leads to emotional exhaustion. You find yourself constantly giving while receiving little in return, pouring energy into someone who will not pour back into you. Over time, this imbalance makes you feel depleted, undervalued, and unloved. Love thrives when both partners are each other's safe place, source of strength, and biggest cheerleader. Without support, the relationship becomes a lonely space where one partner carries all the weight. Support is the proof of value, and without it, love cannot grow.